Hey y'all, welcome to your first year of drum lessons, week 23 drum pad edition. My name is Penny Larson and I am really happy to have you with me today. We are doing a ton of stuff today. We're going to talk about, so we finished up our rudiments a couple weeks ago. I mentioned, hey, now what are we going to do with these? Well, so we're going to talk about different ways to interpret the rudiments, and we're also going to talk about different ways to apply them. We started working on Crazy Army last time. We're going to finish the first part of Crazy Army this week, and that's an application of flamadiddles, 7-stroke rolls, and flamacues, right? And we're going to talk about a different way to interpret 5-stroke rolls. We've talked about groups of 5, which we decided can either be called quintuplets or fivelets or artificial groupings of 5. And then we're also going to talk about some two-hand independence, which is going to be super useful for when we get over on the drum set, but it's also just helpful to have your hands thinking differently. One of the best ways to build ambidexterousness, ambidexterity, that's it, ambidexterity. One of the best ways to build ambidexterity is to play independent patterns with both hands, and then we're going to switch them up too. So that's a really great way to kind of just balance both your hands, but also like your brain. And we talked about that before, right? Your hands don't do anything without your brain. So it's a great way to balance your thinking about these patterns. Let's start with a different way to interpret the 5-stroke roll. We've got our little handout. Not much to this one, looking at it maybe. Our first line, we're going to do a very basic 16th notes and then a 16th note interpretation of the 5-stroke roll. The second line, now I'm switching up, I'm doing a 32nd note interpretation of the 5-stroke roll. So far the first two lines should be nothing new. I'm including them for context, okay, to sort of give us a base to work off of. The third line, now we're going to play our quintuplets for that second measure, but we're going to use alternating sticking at first. We just want to get the feel in our head. And then the bottom line, we're going to go back to the 5-stroke roll sticking, but we're going to play it as quintuplets instead of, 2 32nds and an eighth, right? And so that way we'll have a new way. You can think of it from either direction, right? We'll have a new sticking for the quintuplet, or we'll have a new rhythmic interpretation of the 5-stroke roll. I don't think either way of thinking that is right or wrong. So let's give this a try. I'm going to use a metronome just so to keep me honest, but also so you can keep track of where I'm changing rhythmic feels. I'll play through the first couple lines just to set us up, and then we'll go on. I'm at 100 beats a minute. This is the top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so piece of cake, right? Think of that as like a warm-up for where we're headed. Second line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so same thing, right? This should be, hopefully, nothing new, nothing overwhelming for you, okay? Third line, now we're going to go back and forth between 16th notes, 4 groups of 16th notes per beat, and quintuplets or fivelets or artificial groupings of 5 or 5 16th notes per beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's important to get really comfortable with that grouping of 5 notes, because what we're going to do now is totally mess with the sticking. So we're going to do 5-stroke roll sticking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm going to play them like they were quintuplets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can give your 5-stroke rolls a different feel, obviously, but also when you're on the drum set, this can be a neat way to change hands without changing rhythm. Remember, all of those groupings that are an odd number of notes, right? Because I have an even number of hands, are gonna necessitate a hand change at the end. I shouldn't say necessitate. You could do 5-stroke. Even this pattern. But then it just becomes a group of 3 and 2 displaced over the beat, right? So it's not absolutely essential that you're going to change hands, right? I can do paradiddles, paradiddle, paradiddle, right, left, right, left, right. So I shouldn't use the word necessitate, but facilitate. It's going to make changing hands natural and easier. And that works on the snare drum, on the drum pad, and on the drum set. So let's try the bottom line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and like always, do this at multiple tempos, right? The more you can get comfortable switching back between not only different subdivisions, but different stickings, especially the weirder ones like the 5s and the 7s. And the reality is, if you want to use quintuplets as a fill in a song, this is another one of those things that you really have to pick your spot, right? Because depending on what's going on with the rest of the band, if the rest of the band is playing a 16th note subdivision and you suddenly throw 5s on top, if you are all awesome and it sounds like a really cleanly executed 5/4 polyrhythm, that can be one of the hippest things in the world. But if not everyone is ready for it, it can also easily sound like one of the mushiest things in the world, right? So careful with this. Part of the reason to work on stuff like this, we've talked about this before, is just we're trying to dig down deeper, right? And even stuff that you will never use is gonna make you better. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Well, I'm trying to make you better. I'm trying to get better, so y'all should be trying to get better too. Or why are we here? Okay, so that's it. Like I said, there's not much on that page, you know. Really, what I would do is the bottom 2 lines kind of back and forth, maybe to give yourself, get locked in with the groups of 5 and then go on. Next, we're going to talk about 2-hand independence. And all that means is one hand is going to do something different than the other hand. Mostly what we've done up until now has been the hands are kind of doing one part together. Now we're going to do two parts apart. And obviously they're both your hands, so how much you can apart them is limited, okay? But even our simple eighth note hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare drum, that is two-hand independence. It's very basic, but it is. It's two, you could argue, well, that's just a double stop on 2, maybe, but your left hand is doing one thing, your right hand is doing another. To me, that counts as two-hand independence. Let's up the ante a little. Like all our sheets, this will be down below, and the doobly-doo, please download it, use it as a study guide. I play all this stuff so y'all can hear how it sounds, but I'm really hoping that you're also working on your reading too. One of my great regrets is that my reading, I wasn't taught reading for the first few years that I played, and so my reading has always been a little bit behind my playing, and it still is to this day, and I regret that. But catching up my reading is a lot of work, and the reality is nowadays I think I read well enough, right, that it isn't that highest priority for me, but I can read this, right? So there has to be a baseline where you should be trying to read stuff. This shouldn't be out of your scope of reading. So what we're going to do, and there's a little key up here, the top line is going to be your right hand, the bottom line, so the notes point down, are going to be your left hand. That's a little different than the way we normally do notation, but we're only going to use two hands. So put all your other hands away. So we can get away with using this kind of notation. First one, again, I'm setting us up with something very simple, just eighth notes on both hands. Then 16th notes with the right hand, eighth notes with the left, eighth notes with the right, 16ths with the left, and then 16ths with both. Okay, so now we're set up. First thing we're going to do past that is eighth notes with the right hand, and we're going to go through those 16th note rhythms, 1 EN, 2 EN, 3 EN, 1 E, a 2 E, a 3 E, a 1, and a 2, and those, and we're going to play those with the left hand against the right hand. And then we're going to switch that up, and the left hand is going to play the eighth notes, and the right hand is going to play the 16th notes. And then we're going to do some of those 16th notes overlapping, and that's where this gets trickier. Let's run through them. I'm going to put on the metronome, and I'm going to play each one a few times, and then I'm going to go on to the next one. And I'm going to do that for number 1 through number 12, and then we'll stop and we'll talk about the rest, because I think the first 12 are pretty self-explanatory. Numbers 13 through 18 we'll want to think about a little bit more. I'll play each one 8 times before I go on to the next one. And we're going to do this at 90 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, in case it's not obvious, 12 is a little bit of a bear for me, which is funny because it's basically the same as 10 physically, it's just in a different spot on the beat. But 12, my hands are like, hey, what are we doing? And I've said this a few times in the past, but I'm sharing with you guys I'm trying to, honestly, I'm dumping a lot of stuff into this first year of lessons. And a lot of it is stuff that I play all the time, and some of it is stuff that I don't play all the time, like every last little exercise. And this is an example of that, in case it's not clear. But so the first 12 measures, like I say, I think are those feel pretty straightforward, right? So now number 13, we're going to do two 16th note patterns together. Our right hand is going to go 1 E end, 2 E end, 3 E end. And we're going to do that for 3 bars, right? 1 E end, 2 E end, 3 E end, 4 E end. And we're going to change what our left hand is doing against it. And I'm going to help you hear that by playing my right hand on the neoprene part and my left hand on the gum rubber part. So number 13 is, so if we think about this as two things together, right? We've got together, together, right, left, together, together, right, left. Okay, fine. But we're trying to think of it like two separate things. So like so. It's kind of like a few weeks ago when we did the polyrhythms, and I said, you know, you want to be able to hear the 2 against 3 as 2 separate things. It's basically the same as that. You want to be able to hear the da-da-dun, da-da-dun, da-dun, da-da-dun as 2 separate things. Bonus points if you can count each of them out loud. I can't. My counting isn't that independent. But that means you really got it. I will. You've got to take my word for it. I will say that I can feel each side when I'm playing it. You know, when I hear the 2 different voices, I don't have to think of it as together, together, right, left, together, together, right, left. I can hear okay. Number 14, same idea, just with a different rhythm. Right hand stays the same, 1 E and 2 E and. Left hand is 1 and a 2 and a. And that sounds like this. This one is really tricky because it's very easy to let yourself, I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's important to try to not flam these notes, right? You want all of these in the whole exercise. When the hands are playing together, you want them to play together. Number 14, and then when we get to it, number 17, it's very easy to kind of let yourself drift into right, flam taps. We don't want that. Okay, and then the last one with the right hand playing 1 E and. Now the left hand is going to play E and A. Okay, so like I say, down towards the bottom of the page, this is where they start to get a little crazy. And the reason this is 2-hand independence 1 is because we're just getting started with this concept. Okay, so the last 3, now we're going to switch the 1 E and to our left hand. Number 16. Number 17, this is another one that we have to make sure it doesn't sound like flam taps. And then finally, number 18. It's important to play these well more than fast. It seems like I say that a lot. It's kind of always true. We want to play things fast, but well is better than fast. To quote the great guitarist Steve Morse, speed that's not accurate doesn't count. We're going to finish up today with letter B of part 1 of Crazy Army. We did basically the first 2 lines last week. As we get to the second repeat, the pattern changes. And then as we go into letter B, we've got some more 7-stroke rolls. So I'm picking up right at letter B. And again, this is a traditional march. It's almost 100 years old. There'll be a link to it in the doobly-doo, again, because it's definitely pretty tiny, right? So hopefully you've been working on it. Letter A. Let's start from the beginning of letter A just so we can get through it. 1, 2, 1, 2. So let's talk through B. I just played B with a couple flubs, so yay. But let's talk about what's going on. The trickiest part for me of B happens right towards the beginning, and in some ways it's the easiest part. So like letter A, I've got pick up 7-stroke roll, but I've actually got a roll before that, right? So we're continuing from the second ending of part of letter A, and I've got flam taps. Okay, so 1 E and 2 E and that always messes with my brain. Okay, no matter, I've been playing this for, honestly, I came to this late, okay, which still means I've been playing it for like 20 years, okay, and I still, when I get to this part, in the measure, so at letter B, there's a measure that has flamacue on top, and the next measure with the 1 E and 2 E and just messes with my head because of the breaks in there. And then I've got another flamacue, but it's like off the beat. Okay, and then another 7-stroke roll, and then another flamacue that kind of goes into 2 more flam taps, but now I stop before resolving the flam taps. So you end on the and after 2 there, and then 2 more flamadiddles, and then more flam taps. And that happens in both the first ending and the second ending. The second ending, we just stop on beat 2, 1 E and a 2. So here's letter B. Let's see if I can kill those flubs for you. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, see what I meant last week? There's a lot of repeating the same elements, right? So you don't have to like reinvent too much this week. There's that measure that trips me up that's new, but it's a simple rhythm, 1 E and 2 E and, right? It just messes with my head because I swear to God, that's why it's there, is to mess with your head, right? You've got this nice, right, flowy, 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 lots of notes. Here we go. We keep going. We're going, we're going, we're going. Stop. Right. So let's play all of part 1. 1, 2, 1, 2. Cool, right? Playing some of these old marches is one of the best ways to work on your rudiments in a way that you actually feel like you're playing some music. Flamacues, super useful on the drum set. 7-stroke rolls, super useful on the drum set. I mean, Steve Gadd played this piece as a snare solo on the drum set with, adding bass drum and hi-hat. He did it as an intro for this cool Chuck Mangione tune called Legend of the One-Eyed Sailor, which I bet there's a lot of people that know Steve Gadd played this solo that have never heard that tune. It's a hard tune to find, especially the studio version. There's a live version, which ironically enough is not Steve Gadd playing drums anymore with Chuck Mangione, but it is still Crazy Army, right? So I encourage you to check that out. The album is called Land of Make Believe by Chuck Mangione, and I'll leave a link to that. And if I can find the studio version somewhere on YouTube, I'll leave a link to that as well. It's a great solo that Steve uses, but it also works really well as an intro to this tune. And how can you not fall in love with a song called Legend of the One-Eyed Sailor, right? Okay, so that's all of part one of Crazy Army. Again, we're going through this kind of at a leisurely pace because I want you to learn it. I don't want, a lot of these exercises we do, if you play them a few times and you're like, oh, okay, I think I got it. Okay, I think I got it. I want you to master all this stuff. I do, but I would be hypocritical if I, didn't say, play everything a million times, right? We all have these things that we get excited about, and we all have limited time, whether I'm talking about today or this year or your lifetime. We're all dealing with a finite amount of time, and we have no idea how much that is for good and ill. And so, to a certain extent, if you find something and you're like, okay, I think I got it, like the 5-stroke roll interpretation that we did first today. I mean, I had as much as admitted this is kind of an esoteric, application, interpretation of the 5-stroke roll. It's cool, work on it. It will expand your ability if you can play it well. And, maybe you go over it a little bit. We played it at 100 beats per minute. I can probably play it at 120-ish. But if you don't want to get it to 120, or, if you get it to 120 and you're like, I don't want to get it to 140. Clearly, I don't want to get it to 140. I haven't put in the time with that I put in with other stuff, right? So, but when we're actually learning a piece of music, to me, that feels different, okay? And that's one reason I like to use music in my lessons as much as I can. For the drum set YouTube lessons, it's a little tricky because copyright is what it is. And even if I'm teaching a song and it's fair use, YouTube's algorithm is not always super awesome at determining that. So that's why here we might end up doing more songs than over there. There we'll do drum parts from songs, but we're not gonna play along with the song. Here, I mean, I suppose because it's a snare solo, we're playing the whole song. Although it's a march, there's a bass part too, but you know what I mean. All right, guess what? What? Penny's rambling again. All right, so that's our lesson for today. Lots of stuff, but I think everything is pretty doable. Some of the two-hand independent stuff towards the bottom of that page, that's where I would spend, if you're keeping up with these lessons, that's the meat for today. Assuming you can play the first part of Crazy Army. Once you can play the first part of Crazy Army, then work on the bottom section of Two-Hand Independence 1. And of course, you're working on all this stuff hours every day, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm going to wrap. I will see you guys on Friday, and we're going to do something totally different on Friday, and yet just a continuation of what we've been doing, because that's how this works. We're building out our spider web. I hope you guys are well, and I will see you in a couple days. All right. Love you very much. Take care. Bye.